Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 6, The Butler, the Husband, the Wife, and Her Mother. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of this week's episode. After Maxwell and the children leave for the museum in celebration of Brighton's purported victory as class president, Sylvia reports that her lunch with Uncle Jack and Cousin Marcia from Boca, at her lunch, she told them that Fran had eloped with a wealthy Broadway producer and was living in a palace, finally one-upping Jack and Marcia. Fran enjoys the anecdote until she learns that Jack and Marcia are circling for a place to park. While she initially refuses to go along with her mother's lie, her resolve disappears when Jack and Marcia congratulate her on catching a husband and no longer being an old maid. In the first of many complications, Niles gets roped into pretending to be Maxwell Sheffield. Then, the representatives from the Professional Butlers Association arrive early to evaluate Niles. Then, Maxwell and the children return, and Maxwell gets guilted into pretending to be Niles. The charade continues, and the children take advantage of their new butler. Then, we learn Brighton didn't win the election, and that he had lied because he wanted to be a winner like his dad, who had been president of his house at Eton. Fran realizes that no parent should ask their child to lie and pretend to be something they're not, so she comes clean to her relatives about her role in the family, while Niles continues to pretend to be the master of the house. The Professional Butlers Association is willing to admit Niles because he stayed calm during the charade going on around him. Then Cece arrives and ruins the last part of the charade, threatening Niles' association membership. Fran saves the day by pointing out the lengths Maxwell went to help Niles, and the evaluators extend an offer of membership to Niles because, well, after all, they need the dues. Did I miss anything, Bernadette?
I think you've got it.
Excellent. So, just we're like we did last week, we're gonna go through the episode sort of scene by scene. I'll just mention that we meet two of Fran's new relatives in this episode, Uncle Jack and Cousin Marcia. But I guess let's start with the first scene. This episode opens up with Fran and Niles in the kitchen trying to catch a mouse, I should say, in advance of the Professional Butlers Association folks coming to evaluate Niles. I, as an animal lover, I didn't particularly like Niles' threat to the mouse. Like, Fran says something along the lines of, "Oh, we just want to catch you and put you outside," and Niles is like, "And then we're going to kill you." And
to which Fran says that's really unattractive, but kind of a turn on.
Correct. I just found it entirely unattractive. They could have very easily said have a heart trap and then release the mouse, or kept it as a pet. There was no need to threaten the poor little mouse's life, but that's just me. In their discussion as they're trying to find the mouse, which thankfully we don't see them catch it, there's reference to the Professional Butlers Association, and Fran said that something along the lines of, "Oh, I just thought that was so ridiculous," but in a esteemed sort of way. Apparently there is an international guild of professional butlers. So it's not that
really
outlandish. According to a quick Google, there is an international guild of professional butlers. There's also an international butler academy. So go figure. I had no idea. Interesting.
But they had a pretty easy camaraderie in the scene, like they're very much at ease with one another, I feel like.
Yes. And they, as we will see and discuss later in the episode, they really do have a nice camaraderie, and they do feel very comfortable together. So I don't have anything else about scene 1. How about you?
So it's a little bit cheating, but I have a question for you.
I hope I have an answer.
Did Fran's sweater remind you of anything? I take that as a no.
Honestly, I can't recall what she's wearing in the first.
It's what scene. She's wearing throughout.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did it remind me?
It's the sweater.
Okay. I wanted to talk about her sweater later. Does it? It reminds me of a sweater I own, but I don't think that's what you're getting at.
Oh, really? Nope. That's not what I was going for.
I mean, it's sort of cow-like.
Yeah, like a calico cat, kind of.
Oh, I thought cow as in
Oh,
moo.
oh no, I meant cat as in meow.
Oh,
Well,
interesting.
well, because it has like the three different colors, like a calico, and they were
Right.
looking for a mouse, and so I just thought that kind of fit.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. I did not draw that connection at all. Um,
Mm-hmm.
for those of you who, as Bernadette said, we're going to do a little cheating right now. But for those of you who do not have the sweater in mind, it's a white sweater with big, large black buttons down the center. I think there's 3 or 4 of them, and then there's
Mm-hmm.
spots of black and like a cream brown color.
Mm-hmm.
And it
Against, yeah, the white. Yeah.
right, and
Mm-hmm.
it's not fitted, so it's just it,
Mm-hmm.
like hangs straight down. Um, so yeah, just so you can get an image in your mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So sorry, that's kind of where my mind went since they were looking for a mouse.
Oh, that's interesting. I just, when I put the episode on, I totally had forgotten that was how it started. I remembered the charade that we will talk about at length, but I didn't
Mm-hmm.
recall them trying to trap a mouse. Maybe I
Mm-hmm.
just blocked it out because I don't like Niles threatening the poor little mouse. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but
And
yeah,
yeah, and I'll have another comment when we get to the fashion section, but that's just one of the things I thought kind of fit with that scene. So I'm ready for the next scene if you are.
absolutely. You want to tell us what happened next?
Hmm. So we head out into the living room, and Maxwell comes in wearing his yellow wellies, his Wellington boots, because there is a chance of rain. And of course, Fran's kind of like, oh, like, why are you wearing that? Usually you're so GQ, but now you're Gordon's fisherman. And Maxwell's like, well, you're the nanny. I don't pay you for fashion advice. And she's like, it's my day off. Do some fashion advice on the side. But anyway, we learned that Brighton has become class president. They are getting ready to go out, I believe, to the museum. Is that correct,
They're going to
Debbie?
the Met.
The
Yes.
Met.
I
Yes.
probably said
And
museum, but
yeah, and
specifically
there's
the Met.
yes, and as Brighton points out, there's a fine line between an award and punishment in their household. Um,
Yes.
but again, Brighton references. We'll get that. Well, okay, I'll skip that part because we'll talk about it in our notables. But it's mentioned that whenever Maxwell was at Eton, he was the president of his house. And it seems like it's one of those stories that he has told numerous times, according to everybody's reaction to it.
15 or 20 times, as he admits later.
Mm-hmm. And as Fran's helping them get ready to go out, she talks about how uh, her uncle Jack and cousin Marcia are in town, and her mom Sylvia has always had this kind of competition with Jack where they try to outdo each other. And whenever, for instance, her mom moved to Flushings, he moved down to Boca and to Florida. And the only thing the mom ever beat him to is growing a mustache. Um,
Correct.
but and Maxwell during this time was like, I didn't ask, but Fran's telling him about Jack and Marcia, and then they finally leave, and of course, Fran's like, boy, they talk your ear off.
Right.
uh, yeah, but because Niles has come in, and apparently someone has sent caviar. But Niles and Fran share a look, and they decide they're going to eat the caviar together, and she'll just write a thank you note.
On behalf of Maxwell, the
Of
intended
course.
recipient of the caviar.
Yes, yes. I'll let you take over from here, Debbie, because it kind of there's a change.
Yeah, that was basically the whole scene. I just want to
Mhm.
point out to you that here we see Maxwell planning to spend time with the children.
Yes, yes. It's
Which is
just him and the children.
correct, which is something we haven't really seen so far,
Mm-hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
here he's going to spend some quality time with the kids. I just want to add, to what you said at the very beginning of the scene, which you're right, that Fran's picking on him for these big yellow boots. The rest of what he's wearing is, slacks and a jacket and a button
Yep.
down. So it
Yep.
totally looks ridiculous.
Uh-huh.
Although I guess I'm not sure if jeans would have looked any better, but
Mm-hmm.
she's right, he looks ridiculous. Um,
Mhm.
so you'll note that not to go too far into fashion, but you'll note that Maggie is not wearing beige. Um,
Mhm.
and so it's very clear in the scene that Maxwell is really proud of Brighton for being elected class president. And Maxwell makes a comment about how Brighton worked so hard. And Maggie, of course, can't believe he won because that meant someone would have had to vote for him.
Uh-huh.
But after Maxwell says that he worked so hard, Maggie points out that Maxwell wrote the speeches, came up with the campaign platform, and organized the school bus tour.
Mhm.
Um, so it's not, it sounds as though Brighton didn't really do very much in his own campaign.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah,
Mhm.
I think you summarized that scene very well.
Thank you.
Is there anything else? There's a fine line between reward and punishment in this house.
Mhm.
Was also something I wanted to point out that Brighton clearly he raises a good point.
Mhm.
I think most kids, at least of his age, would prefer to go and get ice cream instead of
Mhm.
go to an art museum.
Mhm. Although Gracie was looking forward to seeing the scream.
Correct. That is something that we will see again in, I think, 2 episodes, maybe 3.
Mhm.
So her love of
Yeah.
Scream.
Oh, uh, I also thought it was funny, like Brighton's kind of talking about he's the man of I can't recall the exact phrasing, and then Fran's like, zip your fly.
Yeah, Fran calls
Or-
him a man of vision, a leader of vision, and a man amongst men, or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And yet he did something so human and so fallible by failing to zip his fly.
Mhm. Yeah.
So I don't have anything else for this scene. As sort of full disclosure, I didn't think there was as much in this episode to talk about as in other episodes we've
Mhm.
discussed. So
Well, there's stuff I'll talk about in one of our shticks related to
yes,
this particular scene. I'm sure you're on the same page with that. But yeah, I
yes,
think we can head over to the next scene, which happens the same day.
yeah. So actually, this I'm gonna quote Bernadette. This episode is very self-contained because
Mhm.
everything happens in one day. So
Mhm.
it's unlike the last episode where we had, the domestic tranquility scene at the beginning, and then later that week it was the wedding and the trip to the zoo and Gracie running away. Here, everything happens all at once,
Mhm.
or I should say, all in one day.
Yes.
Um,
Mhm.
so in the next scene, the doorbell rings and Fran gets it, and it's her mother Sylvia, she's like, "Mom, what are you doing here?" "Oh, I have to tell you about my lunch with Jack and Marcia." And so she starts recounting how Jack was talking about Marcia and her doctor husband, Marcia and her 4-carat solitaire, Marcia and her beachfront property right next to Dan Marino. And it was clear that Sylvia felt as though Jack was rubbing Marcia's success in her face. So when she had an opportunity, they asked about Fran. She said, "I told them you eloped with a rich Broadway producer and we're living in a palace on the Upper East Side." And Fran says,
Mhm.
"Ma, what's wrong with you? You forgot to mention the butler."
Yeah.
um, but and so there's a comment about, "Oh, I wish I could have seen the look on their face." And Sylvia's like, "You will." And Fran's like, "Where are they?" "Oh, they're looking for a parking spot."
Mhm.
That's what they are. Fran says, "No way, I'm not going to participate in this scheme. I'm not going to lie to them. Like, it's not right." And Sylvia makes this comment about, "It's good to have choices. Not that I had a choice when I was in labor with you for 10 hours and that big head." Um, perfect, perfect example of maternal guilt.
Uh-huh.
But
But Fran's
Fran,
response is hilarious.
go ahead.
Sorry, it won't happen again.
Exactly. So Fran is dead set on not participating in this lie. Um,
Mhm.
and that all changes when the doorbell rings and she opens the door to Jack and Marcia, and Jack is like, "So you finally caught yourself a husband?" And
Mhm.
Marcia says, "Thank God you're not an old maid anymore."
Uh-huh.
Um, so at that point, Fran decides to stick it to them. And
Mhm.
so this is a rather long scene. Why don't we talk about that much and then we'll continue on with the scene after, if that makes
Okay.
sense?
Uh-huh.
So just basically until Niles makes the mistake of walking into the room.
Yeah.
Okay. So, you know, they come in and so Jack and Marcia come into the Sheffield home and Sylvia is showing it off, like, see, isn't this a palace? Like, look how, basically, look around, look how gorgeous this is. And so they start talking about square footage. And, Marcia comments that her house is 3,800 square feet. And Fran's response is, well, this is 38,000. You should see the upstairs. It's enormous.
Yep.
Uh, I couldn't help but think to myself, 3,800 would be a very large space in New York City. So
Uh-huh.
38,000 would be crazy expensive.
Yes.
So yeah. What do you think of this competition, this familial competition?
Um, so most of my cousins live elsewhere. So I didn't grow up with a bunch of cousins or anything like that. So I personally have not really experienced this type of like family competition. I don't know. Have you, Debbie?
Well, so my parents waited a really long time before having me. So all all of my cousins are significantly older. Almost all of my cousins are significantly older than I am. So like they were like getting married before I was like 15.
Hmm.
So there is no competition. Like we're just different generations. So there's really no
Yeah.
competition there.
Yeah.
Um
Yes.
so I thought it was more like, to me it seems more like peer competition, not necessarily sibling or
Hmm.
cousin rivalry. It makes me think there is an episode um in a couple seasons where Fran makes a comment about how she's in favor of sibling riflery, and someone says, "I think you mean rivalry." She said, and she mocks loading a shotgun and shooting it. So I
Oh
think
my goodness.
I won't give any of the context so as not to ruin it, because we will have plenty to discuss when we get to that episode. Um, but so I think there's a lot of built-in competition in this family.
Hmm.
Um, and it's sort of interesting, the um how would I phrase it, the markers of success.
Hmm.
Again, Marcia and her doctor husband, Marcia and her 4 carat solitaire, Marcia and her beachfront property right next to Dan Marino.
Hmm.
Like all of
Very
those. Go ahead.
material kind of markers, or what were you
I
gonna
was I was
say?
gonna say sort of old fashioned, I guess.
Hmm. Well, yeah.
Um, I mean, they start with her doctor husband,
Hmm.
and her 4 carat solitaire. That sounds like a very big solitaire to me.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I mean, a beachfront property. I mean, with climate change, that'll go great in in the not so distant future. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah, what do you think of Sylvia bringing Marcia and Jack there without any warning?
Oh, I would be livid if I were Fran.
Oh, me too.
I would be so livid. Um,
Absolutely.
because it's also like one thing, like Fran was all, like you were saying, she was amused by Sylvia telling, them that she had married, um, and was living on the Upper East Side. But when it came to them actually coming to the house, that was a whole different level to it.
Correct.
And again, until um, Marcia made the comment, "Thank God you're not an old maid anymore." She was not going to play along with it. But that kind of spurred her, to go into it. And as we see, it gets very complicated very quickly.
That is
So,
putting it very nicely.
hmm so yeah, I mean, I I don't know what Sylvia was thinking. She just went overboard with that.
She just
Uh,
wanted to win, I
I
think.
know, but
She was just so tired of not winning, and she
yeah,
wanted to shut them up once and for all.
but she obviously didn't think things through. Because first of all, if you're going to try to pull off a charade like this, or a charade, as Maxwell says, like you would think that you would want to give Fran a heads up
Yeah.
so that there's a plan, instead of just like giving her a couple of minutes while they're looking for a parking place.
I mean, now
So
keep in mind it is New York City, so it was also possible that they would not have been able to find a parking spot.
mhm.
But the fact that Sylvia, so also it's sort of a weird setup, right? That, um, you know, they're looking for a parking spot, but they stop so Sylvia can hop out of the car to go let Fran know they're coming.
Mhm.
Like that just seems weird.
Well, I mean, I guess again, not there's not really cell phones in this time period, so the only way to give her a heads up, I guess, would be for her to personally say that.
I
Uh,
guess, but it sort of like to me, there are just so many things that we will talk about shortly that should have tipped Jack and Marcia off that this was all made up. And like to
mhm.
me, that's just like the first one.
Yeah.
That like why would Fran need like if they're dropping in on Fran, why would she need any warning?
Mhm.
Like why would Sylvia get out of the car in advance? Unless
Well, I
it's
mean, it's usually good manners to let people know you're coming over, because I mean, you don't necessarily know what someone's plans are. You know, if they had had like some type of um, like company over, for instance,
do you think that
that
would
would
have
have been
stopped them?
probably not, but still,
I don't think it would have
there's a
stopped
shred
them.
of etiquette. But yeah, so but yeah. Anyway, Fran does not have a lot of time before they do
No.
get there. Um, and again, it's you can very much tell like the 3,800 to 38,000 square feet. Like it's so clear that this is the type of relationship they have where they always have to make it one up
Correct.
each other.
Correct. 38,000 square feet would have been enormous, obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Um, I don't care how big the upstairs is, it's definitely not 38,000 feet.
Yep.
So I think we're up to the point where poor Niles makes the mistake of walking into the room and walking into this um, alternate universe, alternate
Mm-hmm.
reality, right?
Yes.
And so he says he's going to run to the bank and gets trapped. And Fran basically, you know, in her not so staged whisper, saying, "Look, these are my relatives from Boca. You're Mr. Sheffield. I'm your wife. We're deliriously happy." And he's like, That's a big favor to ask." And she's like, "Yeah, it was a big favor for me not to uh, tell Mr. Sheffield when you broke the main vase or whatever."
Yeah, about the
Um,
crack in the main vase.
right. And so he agrees to play along. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so my first question is, shouldn't Jack and Marcia have known that something was up when Niles didn't know who Sylvia was? Like he introduces himself as Maxwell Sheffield, producer, and
Mm-hmm.
Jack, whatever his name is, realtor, and Marcia, and then he goes and tries to introduce himself to Sylvia, and you are your mother-in-law. Oh, that's right. I was drunk at the wedding or something like
Yeah.
that, which
Yeah.
kind of cuts against, you know, the pretend picture of domestic tranquility, felicity that they're trying to paint.
Yeah. Well, so here's the other thing is that shortly before Niles comes in, they're trying to explain to Jack and Marcia that Maxwell's out. And then Sylvie even says they're rehearsing Sunday in the park, so he won't be home until Monday. And Fran's like, is there any oxygen on your planet? But so they've established that Maxwell's out. So I'm curious why Fran decided to make Niles Maxwell instead of making Niles Niles. Does that make sense? Oh, well, I guess they said they're going to wait until Maxwell's going to come home.
Oh,
Um,
see, that's interesting. I just figured he was there. She didn't know when Maxwell and the children would be home. Like,
mhm.
let's see if I can quickly wrap this up so my relatives leave, type thing. Like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, I just thought he was probably, but then it's like, it gets very complicated very quickly. But yeah, if I would think it's very obvious when he doesn't recognize Sylvia as the mother-in-law that
correct.
something's off.
So
And then he gets really into it though.
yes, which is actually where I was going to go because I thought it was so interesting how quickly and easily he waxes poetic on Fran. He
Hmm.
says, "I curse every," because Jack says, "So business must be very good." And he says something like, "Yes, I curse every moment I'm away from my beautiful bride. Of course, I
Hmm.
hobnob with the rich and famous, but the only time I'm truly happy is when I'm with her. She's my center, my compass, the light of my life."
Hmm. And then a little bit later, something about the magic that is Fran.
Correct.
So,
It 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 seems over the top to me at least, and probably
hmm.
to the audience in general. But
Hmm.
it amazed me how quickly he was able that just rolled off his tongue.
Yeah, yeah. And it wasn't done in a very sarcastic manner either.
Correct.
because Niles is known for his dry sense of humor. His one-liners, that kind of his foil to other people in a scene. But even though it was very, the purple prose, is that what it's called? Like, I mean, it's very over the top. He wasn't saying it in a very sarcastic way.
No. And it just came out. It anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So then of course, Jack and Marcia want to meet the kids who
Mm-hmm.
we know aren't there because they went with Maxwell to the Met.
Mm-hmm.
And she says, "Oh, well, you can't meet them. The kids, they're not here." Also, I don't know if you caught, Marcia makes a comment about, "We want to meet your kids." Oh, I guess we should say his kids since they're not the fruit of your womb.
Mm-hmm.
And Francis, well, that's why this womb can still wear a bikini.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if she was indicating that her body changed because of pregnancy or because she had a C-section scar. Either way, I think that exchange was, emblematic of their relationship.
Well, and I think I interpreted it as the weight just because of what happens later on that we'll talk about. But yeah, they're very snippy with one another.
That's putting it nicely.
Yep. Quick to make those kind of cutting remarks.
Yes.
Yeah. But the children are not there because the butler took them to the Met because it's Butler Day.
Bring a butler, get a free beverage. Like again,
it's like that should be a tip off.
Exactly. So shortly thereafter, the doorbell rings, and this is a recurring thing that happens in this episode is just when you think things are complicated enough, the doorbell rings and almost all hell breaks loose.
Yes.
So we have the two representatives from the Professional Butlers Association arriving early to catch the prospective member unawares. And there's some quick thinking on their feet. Originally they, Fran tells them to come back later because Niles isn't here right now. And Niles realizes that, oh no, if they go away and come back later, they'll realize I'm Niles. And so they invite them in and say, we'll tell you everything you need to know about Niles. And so one of them says, I take it you're the master of the house, to which Niles replies, apparently.
Yeah. But I did have to chuckle a little when they're introducing to like Jack and Marcia and they're saying they're from the Professional Butlers Association. And I think it's Jack says, I'm surprised you're not at the museum.
Correct.
And the two butlers are like looking at each other in confusion.
Oh, I didn't take that as confusion. I took that as they were offended we as the audience, because we know of the existence of the pretend Butler Day, we know that's what Jack's referring to, but the Professional Butlers Association folks don't know that. And so by saying, I thought you'd be I'm surprised you're not at the museum, I took it as they interpreted that as being told they were like, historical.
Interesting.
That they belonged in a museum, not that they should have gone to the museum.
They're of bygone eras.
Yes, thank you. Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just thought they were just kind of like, what are you talking about?
Fair. So things get even more complicated when the door opens and guess who's home? It's Maxwell and the children. And immediately, so another thing that should have tipped Jack and Marcia off is when Maxwell comes in the door, he takes his coat off and throws it at Niles.
Yes, who just doesn't even make any attempt to catch it.
Correct.
Just hits Max and it just falls to the floor.
Correct. And you can already tell, like, it's already a mess. Did you catch why they didn't get to go to the museum?
Yes, because of a bomb threat.
Correct. So, yeah. Other things that happened in the scene that probably should have another thing that should have tipped off Jack and Marcia. Fran asks her mother for a Rolade as things are getting more complicated. the phrasing of how people are saying things, it's not exactly, it seems like they are hiding something, which of course we know they are. So
Yes.
Do you have anything else you want to say about this scene?
With them coming home, no, because I think that's pretty quick. And then we change settings for the first time in a while.
So where do we go?
We go to Maxwell's office, and basically we know that, Fran and Niles have kind of filled them in on what's been going. He's like, what kind of bizarre parallel universe did I walk into? And then I think, he's making some type of comment about how weird it is, that Niles is the master of the house and Nanny's or Fran's the wife, and Fran's like, hey, he could do worse. And Niles is like, and I have.
Correct.
And then, basically Niles and Fran are trying to convince Maxwell to join in this charade and help them out by pretending to be Niles. And the children are all for it. Gracie points out that, she'd get to boss daddy around. Brighton makes some type of comment of like, oh, we have a domestic gridlock here.
He says, what we have here is domestic gridlock, a failure of the executive branch and the House to work together.
Mm-hmm.
Fran says, that's right. That Brighton has a point. That's what we need. We need a compromise. And Maxwell says, so you mean you need me to compromise my integrity and go along with this or something like that? And she says, yes, exactly. That's democracy in action.
Precisely. And then, but basically, where we end up in the scene, and also backing up a little, Fran's trying to say, hey, these are employees bonding, like again, trying to convince Maxwell to get in on this. But we kind of, as we're leaving the office, Maxwell's saying, no, we're not going to do this. And I think it's Brighton says, so what you're saying is we have no rights. And Maxwell's like, yeah. He's like, oh, okay. So they all walk out, and Marcia insults Fran. And that's when Maxwell suddenly gets in on it. Do you recall exactly what she said?
So I think what you're missing is as Maxwell walked out, Jack says, I'm so parched. Can I get a beverage or something like that?
Oh, yeah.
And Maxwell says, Niles. And Jack's like, sorry, can I get a drink? Niles. And Maxwell's going to have him go and says something like, there are drinks in the kitchen. Please go help yourself. And the Butler Association people are like, oh, such insolence. And so and that's when Marcia says something like, well, you can't really blame him, that the help is a reflection of the hostess, and poor Franny is in way over her head.
And that's where you see like that Maxwell's demeanor changes.
Correct.
And suddenly he is willing to be a part of the charade. And he goes, for the drinks and stuff. But then, of course, the children take advantage of this.
Yes, they do.
And, Gracie wants her ice cream. And, I think I don't have it written down, but I think Brighton wanted like soda, or Maggie wanted soda.
Maggie wanted a soda. Brighton
wanted both.
Yeah, he wanted his ice cream in his soda. And I think Maggie asked, can I have a soda? And Gracie gleefully says, we can have anything we want. He's Niles, the butler.
Yep. Yep. So, and even when Maxwell's trying to kind of be like, oh, well, I don't think your dad would want you to have something sweets, Niles, as Maxwell Sheffield, is like, oh, just this once, or like
exactly
allows it. But yeah, so Maxwell is going to go get the beverages, the various things that were requested, and the two butlers from the Butlers Association follow him out.
Correct. And
in the meantime, they're saying how adorable the kids are, and then Marcia's like, oh, you want to see mine? Her daughter was at the equestrian something,
Libby.
And of course, Libby, and they make the comment, oh, did Fran say what teeth? Nice teeth or
What a nice
smile?
smile. Or
Yeah.
what a
And
beautiful
then,
smile or something like that.
yeah. And Marsha's like, that's lightning. That's Libby. So obviously, Fran has mixed up the daughter with the horse.
Correct.
And the daughter, Libby, apparently has Marsha's old nose.
Yes.
Um, but anyway, something I noticed, in that previous episode where there's that butler's pantry
Yep.
in between, now it looks like through the door from the living room that there's a hallway,
Yep.
right? And so that's, Maxwell comes in with, the tray and he trips, but he doesn't spill it. He doesn't drop it. And Fran immediately starts laughing. He's like, oh, Niles is so good at physical comedy.
And
then
the real Niles says something like, you got to quit it. You're killing me.
yeah, enough, Niles. You're killing me.
There you go.
Yeah. So we have all that going on. And then the doorbell rings.
Yet again.
Yes. And it's Kevin, who apparently is a classmate of Brighton, and Brighton does not seem too pleased to see him.
And we learn why.
Yes. Apparently it was Kevin who won the election, and he's come over to invite Brighton to his inaugural celebration, even though he, beat Brighton by a landslide.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, go ahead.
Maggie makes the comment, I knew no one would vote for him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so Brighton, kind of reveals it to everyone like, oh, I lied. And then he runs off upset. Yep. And so we next turn to the kitchen where.
Well, before we get there, I have a couple things I want to say about this scene.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, when Maxwell, pretending to be Niles, turns around and changes, he takes on the role, and there's a comment about how his nerves have been shot since what happened on the Falkland in the Falklands.
Yep. Oh yeah.
And so one of the Professional Butlers Association guys says, oh, what ship were you on? And Maxwell just kind of looks at him and says, the other one.
Yep.
And there's, when they're complimenting, before Kevin shows up, they are complimenting Brighton, commenting on how he just won his election. He makes this comment, aw, shucks, mummy, there you go again. I wonder if he was trying to quote someone or impersonate someone. That's I think a running gag in this episode, that Brighton is pretending to be all these different political figures, or referencing all these different political figures. I don't know who he was trying to be there.
Yeah, I don't either.
And then the last thing I want to say is that Kevin, to me, looked like a very young Bill Clinton.
Really?
So, yeah, with the hair and the face, and he looked like a young Clinton. Anyway,
interesting.
So continue on to the next scene where we've changed locations. Now we're in the kitchen.
Yes. So it's Fran, Maxwell, and Brighton. And what I thought was interesting is Fran keeps referring to Brighton as Angel, which again, you wouldn't think is the most appropriate nickname for Brighton.
No.
But during this scene, she keeps referring to Brighton as Angel, and it turns out he lied because he didn't want to be a loser. His dad, he was the president of his house at Eton, and Maxwell's like, oh, only said that in passing, and both Brighton and Fran kind of give him a look, and he's like 15 or 20 times.
Right.
And so Fran's trying to make Brighton feel better by being like, oh, well, people don't always win, like even your dad has had shows that flopped. And then she's like trying to get Maxwell to say how many flops he's had, and he doesn't really quite say anything. But then during this conversation is when Fran has the realization that a parent shouldn't make the child feel like they should be someone they're not.
Correct.
And, what kind of parent would do that? And then she's like, oh, my mother. So this is when she's like, okay, enough is enough. I need to come clean.
Right. And so the next scene, do you have anything you want to say about this scene?
No.
Okay. So the next scene, we cut back to the living room and we hear Sylvia saying to Jack and Marcia, they got their own Lear jet. They flew me to Pennsylvania for a Hershey, which to me just is utterly ridiculous. And so Fran comes clean and tells her relatives that, she lied. She's not married. This is not my house. I'm not married to the Mr. Sheffield. That I'm just the nanny. And she starts to gesture that to the real Mr. Sheffield, but Niles clears his throat and prevents her from busting his piece of the charade. And Marcia's reaction is, did you hear that? She's just a nanny. And I think this is probably something you're going to want to comment on. Maggie says, who asked you, you big green cow? And Fran says, Maggie, it's turquoise, not Maggie, don't call people cows. So yeah, and so then continuing in the scene, as just the butler, Maxwell, pretending to be Niles, makes a comment about how he doesn't think he's seen Mr. Sheffield or the children so happy in a very long time. And of course, the Butlers Association people think that's very inappropriate. But they decide to let him into the Professional Butlers Association because he was able to keep his calm so well while this charade was being played out around him. I think there's a good place to stop and talk about anything, and then we can finish it up.
Yeah. So when Maxwell starts talking, he starts saying, ever since Fran's come, it's been more chaotic, contentious, loud, which is like not helpful. And then he gets into, but they've been the happiest, in a while.
Right.
And then I'm not sure if it's at the end of this scene. I think it's right before where we're going to next. Marcia comments, "It's emerald."
Yes, she
regarding
does.
her outfit. But yeah, was there anything you had to add to that particular scene?
No.
But again, that cow comment is what makes me think that the earlier comment that Fran had was about weight.
Interesting. But keep in mind, two different characters are saying different things. So like maybe Maggie wasn't even there. He wasn't even there when Fran made the comment like, "Oh, that's why this woman can still wear a bikini." So
yeah, but I think in general, that's the running gag. That's the running gag with the with this episode, if that makes sense.
Okay.
That's what makes me think it's connected. But yeah, it's turquoise. It's emerald. Just
I see turquoise. I don't see emerald, but
I see turquoise as well. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
I would agree. It's probably, I think it's turquoise.
So at the very end of this scene, as if, we think almost everything has been resolved, almost everything is out in the open, and then the doorbell rings yet again. And who is it? But it's Cece, who we haven't seen yet this episode. And her arrival basically destroys the last leg of the charade. Thank you. Now I'm overly self-conscious of how to pronounce that word. Thank you. She starts telling the real Maxwell about theater business, and he tries to direct her to Niles, and the facade is broken, and the Professional Butlers Association is not impressed, and so they were going to rescind the offer of membership. But then Fran says, "Hold on a second. When was the last time you seen a boss go to such lengths to protect his employee and whatnot?" And she makes a little heartfelt speech, and ultimately they agree to let Niles in, and because she's right, and plus they need the dues.
Yep, they do need the dues.
And so Fran makes this comment, everything is now out in the open, no more secrets. And Cece says, by the way, I ran into Lauren Bacall. She wanted to know if you got the caviar she sent, which ties back to the caviar that Niles and Fran ate in secret at the beginning of this episode.
Yep. So everything, yes, is now wide out there in the open. Also, just a comment, as the Butlers Association people are leaving, they're like, we're butlers, we know where the door is.
Correct.
Um, but yeah, so ultimately Niles does get in, but we do not see the fallout of the caviar debacle.
Correct. And now, one thing that I don't think we've touched on is how important it was to Niles to get into this association. That his whole
Yes.
family has been members of this association, except for his uncle, who got kicked out, who worked for the Duke of Carlisle, who got kicked out when he broke a vase. And Fran was like, "Well, that's a ridiculous, basically, that's a ridiculous reason to get kicked out." And he says, "Well, he was wrestling naked with the Duchess at the time."
Yep.
Makes it seem a little bit less ridiculous to be kicked out for that.
Yep. Indeed. So yeah, I mean, that's generally the episode, where there's all these lies going about, and by the end of the episode, everything's out in the open.
Right. So I think a good place for us to start would probably be our favorite and not so favorite fashion.
Well, again, given that this takes place in one day, there's not a lot of outfit changes, if at all, because Gran's in the same sweater. So she has that sweater, which again, I liken to a calico cat. Debbie, it seemed more like a cow to you. But then she has like a dark pants, and I feel like a dark shirt underneath that sweater, if I'm recalling correctly. She's in that the entire time. Now, another reason why my mind went to Calico Cat is Sylvia's outfit when she shows up. She's in full animal print. I think leopard, cheetah. I don't know. So to me, it kind of makes sense if Fran's a Calico Cat because cats. But anyway, so Sylvia's decked out like that. Marcia is, I think, a turquoise like jumper type thing. I feel like there's not really an outfit I really like in this episode. I don't know if you did. It just, none of them were, I didn't really like any. What Gracie and Maggie are wearing seem very 90s as well.
Interesting. Yeah.
So anyway, was there anything you liked, Debbie?
Well, I want to point out that we see Cece's olive green coat again, which we saw the other day. So glad that she's wearing it over and over again. That looks somewhat realistic. I actually liked Fran's sweater.
I mean, it wasn't bad. It just wasn't like my favorite outfit of hers ever, you know?
Oh no, that's fair. It's definitely not my favorite, but it's one of the most relatable, I think, because it's so, I don't want to say boring.
It's simple.
But it is it's simple. Yes. As I was rewatching the episode in anticipation of our discussion, I was looking at that sweater and I thought to myself, that's where I got the inspiration. I have a black and white sweater that's somewhat like that. I was like, and I always wear it with, black pants, or black leggings. And like, this is where I got my inspiration. Didn't even realize it.
I did though, like, I guess now thinking back to it, the two butlers from the Butlers Association looked like stereotypical Londoners. I mean, with the bull hats.
Oh, good point.
But yeah, so I don't think there was much to talk about in terms of fashion in this particular episode.
Other than Maxwell's shoes, which we've already covered. I think you're right. But just tying back to the shoes for a second, as you pointed out, he said that when she asked him, like, basically what's going on, you're usually so GQ, he makes the comment that there's a chance it might rain, and her response is, there's a chance I might fall off this chair, but that I'm not wearing a seatbelt. I think that's great. Different people have different risk tolerances, as we're learning.
But I thought it was kind of adorable that he was wearing his yellow wellies like this, because he refers to them now as Wellingtons, but as wellies.
You are far more charitable than I am.
I think it showed I think it showed a softer side to him.
It did. No, that's fair.
Again, especially since he's just going with children. Like, I feel like he's becoming more, I don't know the right term for it. He's warming up a bit. I guess. I don't know. I don't
Yeah,
want to say more human, but like he's just
more
not,
relatable.
yeah, he's not just the strictly professional workaholic type of person, if that makes sense.
No, it's interesting that you say that. I mean, as our wonderful listeners have probably gathered already, I've seen the entire series, so I know what happens. I know how the characters grow and how it ends. And to me, like, you keep pointing out all of these like cold, unpleasant things about Maxwell, but I just see him as someone who's seen his entire character arc. So, like, I see him as more relatable than I think you do.
Mhm. Well, again, I think the whole point is to see growth, from him, to see how Fran has changed the family dynamics by being there and being
Right.
like the warm type of close personal kind of influence versus just an employee.
Right. I think you're right. Do we want to talk about our 90s nostalgia?
Sure.
So you've
I'm going
already
to steal
identified.
your thunder. I'm going to steal your thunder,
Oh, go
Debbie.
ahead. Go
The
ahead.
cars.
Go. Darn it. Yeah, they are old. They look very old.
Mm-hmm.
I was going to just say that you already identified one, which is the fact that they
Mm-hmm.
didn't have cell phones to text or call a friend to say, "Hey, we're coming."
Mm-hmm.
FYI.
And you know what? Now I'm thinking about it. It could have helped a little bit too if Fran had had an opportunity to text like Maxwell and be like, "Hey, maybe don't come home for a little bit,"
Yeah.
or like he could have texted her saying, "Hey, we're on our way home," because the bomb threat or whatever. But like that could have helped a little bit in coordinating the charade if they had phones to text each
Correct.
other on.
Correct. No, you're absolutely right. Or I was just thinking a little bit more warning, would have
Mm-hmm.
gone a long way.
Yeah.
Hell, if Fran wanted, she could have left home and then, oh no, so sad. No one there to see the house.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm at Martha's Vineyard or just some
I'm at
random
Val's
place.
house. I'm at Val's.
Yeah.
Sorry. I won't be able to get home in time to help you lie to our relatives. Sorry, Ma.
Mm-hmm.
Um yeah, so I had two sort of stretches besides the cars. Um One is that the process to become a member of the Professional Butlers Association, there was no online application. It just seemed way more thorough than something would you get now. I don't know if that's
Mm-hmm.
true, but that was just like my impression
Mm-hmm.
of it. And then the other thing, which I think we might want to talk a little bit about, is the use of the term "old maid."
Mm-hmm.
To me, that sounded very dated. Um, I,
Mm-hmm.
I know in my friend group, I'm the only person who uses the term "old maid," usually referring to myself. Um, but I don't think most people use it anymore, given
Mm-hmm.
how society has changed.
Yeah. I mean, aside from the card game, I
Fair.
think people would recognize the term, know what it means, but I don't. I think you're right. You don't typically use that in conversation.
Right. Um, so I only had a couple
Oh
small
no.
things.
Oh, Debbie, that
What?
just made me think of another. So I was just gonna say, I think like these days people joke about becoming a cat lady,
Right.
and that just ties into her sweater then
Oh my
too.
goodness.
Oh man.
I think you might be. I'm beginning to think you're right that it was intentional that she was supposed to be a calico cat. Um, just for that
Or I'm
joke.
just making up these connections, but this is how my brain works.
That is a sign of creativity, connecting the apparently unconnected. So
Thank you for the turning that into a compliment. Yeah, but yeah.
you're very welcome. I actually had just read that in the book "The Gifts of Imperfection" by Brene Brown. She makes a comment about how creativity is being able to connect the unconnected.
Hmm.
So
Yeah. Okay, you were about to say something?
I was going to say I only had a couple little things for Yishakop.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so the only word I caught was Butinsky, which is exactly what it sounds like. It is a person who butts in or intrudes, basically a meddler.
Mm-hmm.
I think Marcia makes that comment referring to Maxwell pretending to be Niles.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that. And then we have yet another example of Fran eating something that is not kosher.
Hmm.
It's the caviar.
Yep.
So apparently,
That's what I figured.
yeah, I mean, I think that's the only thing we see her eat in this episode, other than the toast. But anyway, so true caviar or beluga caviar, which is what they're having, comes from sturgeon fish, and it's made from the eggs of sturgeon fish. And since sturgeon do not have scales, they are not kosher, meaning that their eggs are not kosher. Um, Apparently, caviar that is made out of salmon eggs would be kosher because salmon is a kosher fish. So,
Ah, okay.
yeah, just another little thing that caught my attention. Um,
Hmm.
so I think then we're up to our notable New Yorkers, and I think we had
Hmm.
a bunch.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
they weren't all New Yorkers, obviously, but
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to start this time, Debbie?
um, I'll let you start.
Okay. Well, some of these, they're names that I'm assuming are references, but I didn't have the time to look up, so you can fill in for that. Um, so, well, we already talked, everybody knows, I'm assuming is familiar with GQ, the magazine, and then Gordon's Fisherman. He's like the guy, I think it's Fish Sticks, could
Yes.
be wrong.
Um,
Um,
and I think he's
yeah.
actually the guy from our childhood. So
Hmm.
I think it's yellow cap, gray
Yeah.
hair, gray beard. I think he's been replaced by someone new.
Okay. So the Gordon's Fisherman of our youth is referenced. And then Billy Carter.
Yep. So that is Jimmy Carter's brother.
Oh, okay.
Jimmy Carter is former president of the United States. Um,
Yes.
I knew that Billy Carter was an embarrassment, which is the reference. Um,
Hmm.
but I couldn't tell you. I knew he was a drunk, but I didn't know any. I didn't know specifics, so I did a quick look, and there was an article by ABC News that pointed out that he actually the whole article was about embarrassing family members of presidents.
Oh, okay.
So he's not the only one, but Billy Carter was Jimmy Carter's drunken sibling who apparently accepted a $200,000 loan from the Libyan government and had to register as a rogue nation's agent. He
What?
he tried to uh, capitalize on his name and his brother's success, I guess.
Hmm.
He tried to create Billy Beer, which didn't really go very far. So a beer with his name on it, I guess. Um,
Hmm.
he published a book at one point. He charged for personal appearances. Um, yeah, he
Wow.
yeah the things I put in my formal notes for our discussion were Jimmy Carter's drunken sibling who accepted a $200,000 loan from the Libyan government and had to register as a rogue nation's agent. That was the part that I thought was most interesting.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, because I could definitely tell in the context of things. Like, I obviously know Jimmy Carter, but I didn't know, like, I figured Billy Carter had something to do with that, but I just didn't know. And so, okay, good to know. Drunken.
yeah. Just
Um,
as a side note on Jimmy
hmm.
Carter, did you know
Hmm.
I believe he's the longest lived former president,
Oh,
and he's lived the longest period of time since leaving office.
oh, interesting.
Um, yeah, he's actually kind of interesting. Anyway, go ahead, continue.
Brighton does an impression of Nixon
Yes, he
and says
does.
he is a crook. Or
Yeah, he says, thank you, I am a crook."
yep.
Um, just
And
as
then
a, I'm just going to
go ahead.
comment on that. Sorry, I obviously we all know the statement from Nixon, which was because the people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook. I've earned everything I've got. That's the
Hmm.
actual line from Nixon. That I am not a crook's declaration was made during a press conference in Florida amid charges related to the Watergate break-in. So,
Hmm.
just for a little more context.
Yeah. And then Brighton refers to Maxwell after Maggie points out it was Maxwell who was helping him out. He refers to Maxwell as he's my Hillary, as
Yep.
in Hillary Clinton.
Yep.
And then we have the reference to Edvard Munch, who's painting the Scream that Gracie was really looking forward to and imitates very adorably.
Yep.
And then I had missed on the first round, but you referred to as the caviars from Lauren Bacall, who is a famous actress.
Yes. She was an American actress known for her alluring, sultry presence and her distinctive husky voice. according to Wikipedia.
Mm-hmm. Was she the one who was married to Humphrey Bogart? Or am I mixing that up?
That sounds right, but I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Okay. Sorry. Could be wrong there. And then Dan Marino.
Yes. Sorry. Lauren Bacall, according to biography.com, Lauren Bacall and Humphrey Bogart shared an iconic romance and a happy, albeit short-lived marriage.
Okay.
So,
whew, I know my old stars.
Your Hollywood stars.
Yes. Dan Marino.
Yes. So I didn't know who that was.
I don't either really. The name sounds familiar, but I'm not sure context wise.
According to Wikipedia, he was an American football quarterback from the Miami Dolphins.
Ah, okay. That makes sense. We have, of course, Siegfried and Roy.
Yep.
Chef Boyardee.
I missed that one.
That's Sylvia. Makes a comment about different pet names. Well, when Fran was talking about different pet names for because Fran refers to Maxwell as Mr. Sheffield, and I think Marsha's like, you call your husband Mr. Sheffield, and she's like, oh, it's just like a pet name like Sheffy and like all that kind of stuff, and Sylvia's like Chef Boyardee. And that's right before Sylvia makes the comment that they're rehearsing Sunday in the park, so he won't be home until Monday. And Fran's like, is there any oxygen on your planet?
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, Chef Boyardee. Let's see here. I
have one more.
Cher. Is that your one more?
No, but it's funny. Twice in my notes, I wrote the line, "It's just Niles," like Cher. And not once did it occur to me to put that under my notable New Yorkers notes.
Yeah, because essentially Fran at one point asked Niles what his family name was. He's just like, just Niles, like Cher.
Correct.
Okay. What's your other one?
Perot. That was a reference to H. Ross Perot, who ran for president in 1992 and 1996. And in 92, he received about 19% of the popular vote. He ran as a third-party candidate. He was a billionaire. He died actually in July 2019, I believe.
Oh, yeah. Yep, I had Perot down as well, but yeah, missed it. But yeah, so obviously there are a lot more political references in this particular episode due to the whole election subplot with Brighton.
On that note, we already talked about that, Brighton's comment about what we have here is domestic gridlock, a failure of the executive branch and the House to work together. I feel like that was also a parody of some political figure, but I didn't know who.
Yeah, I got that impression as well. And yeah, I don't know the actual reference. So if anybody knows, leave it in the comments.
If only we were older, we would know.
So again, also, I guess kind of running into the 90s nostalgia too, is just all of the older kind of political references.
Fair. Which if we were older or they were newer, we might have a better shot at knowing, other than the Nixon one, which I do think is timeless.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I have no other notable New Yorkers. Did you catch anybody else that I missed?
I don't believe so.
All right. So I think we're down to our last shtick, which is future fun. And then we'll do our episode rating. So it's interesting that it's just Niles, like Cher comment. The fact that Niles has no family name will play a big role in season 4 in the episode, The Facts of Lice. So I just wanted to share that. So we have something to look forward to many, many moons from now when we finally get up to season 4.
Yeah.
So I think it's your turn to rate the episode first. And remember, for our listeners, it's 1 out of 5 lipsticks. So
yeah. And I'm struggling just because I know this will probably shock you. Because I know how much you loved last week's episode, and last week's episode's your favorite. I think I enjoyed this episode a little bit more than last week.
Really?
because there were times when I was laughing out loud due to the shenanigans. Um, and I really enjoyed the easy camaraderie between Niles and Fran throughout this episode. And I liked that, like, even though Maxwell was so against participating in it, as soon as Marcia like insulted Fran, he was in, he was going to help. So yeah, I actually like this a little bit more, and I rated last week's episode as a 4.5. Now the only thing that's kind of holding me back a little this week again are just those continual kind of fat jokes. I just personally, like, I don't think it's that humorous, and I don't think it's funny to make fun of people's appearances in general. So I don't know if I could cheat, because I already cheated last week by kind of putting 4.5, although we're making the rules. So
We do make
whatever.
the rules. Exactly.
So like, I'd almost want to give this a 4.75.
All right. I mean, you are the rater. So if that is your final decision, I will mark it in our tally.
Okay, thank you. I'll put it as a 4.75.
Although I gotta say, I'm curious. You gave the smoke gets in your lies.
Yeah,
So
that's gonna have to be downgraded when we reevaluate at the end of the season.
Okay.
Just as something in the future to look forward to, me lowering that rating.
Okay, because I was gonna say, I wonder what it'll take to get a perfect 5 out of you.
I mean, this was very close. If not for those couple of jokes throughout, it probably would have been a 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
I did not particularly care for this episode. Like when I saw that this was the episode that we were going to discuss next, I was like, it's not an episode I go out of my way to rewatch. It's not an episode that I particularly like. I kind of had to sort of drag my feet a little bit on watching it before our discussion. So I'm sort of torn as well. I know I've previously gone on record as saying that a 3 is probably the lowest I'm gonna go. And so I'm I kind of want to hold to that, but I also kind of want to give it a 2 because I did not like it.
Okay, go for it.
So
I celebrate our differences, Debbie.
I'm going to meet myself halfway, and I'm going to give it a 2.5.
Okay.
Lipsticks.
There you go.
Yeah, we have better. In my mind, we have better episodes coming. And I'm actually really looking forward to a few of the episodes in our next couple weeks. So I look forward to those more than this one. So yeah, sorry to everyone else who really liked this episode.
Oh no, I mean, I don't take it personally. I think it just goes to show that different people will like different things, right?
That's true. All right, well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 7, Imaginary Friend.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.